The Miami Hurricanes only improved by 2 wins from 2022 to 2023, but the numbers tell a different story.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much again for making Locked On Canes your first or second listen. I ran out of time in my last episode. I had more stuff to say, so here we are. I think it was Bill Parcells who said, "You are what your record says you are." And I'm not going to argue with that. Miami Hurricanes were a 7-5 team, but I'm hoping what some of the other numbers were is a sign for significant improvement, certainly from 2022 to 2023. And I'd like to think laying the foundations for even more improvements in 2024. So Miami went from 5-7 in 2022, which is one of the most miserable football seasons ever, right? Middle Tennessee loss. I don't want to get into it, but 2022 was absolutely miserable. 2023 was much less miserable. And if you look at the statistics, team stats and individual stats, honestly, Miami should have made more than a 2-game improvement. We will never forget that they were literally a kneel down away from being 8-4. I think 8-4 would be a better reflection on what Miami actually accomplished on the field this year. We've already given you guys some good stats that show big picture improvement from 22 to 23. Here's another one that was sent to me by a good friend of mine going back years. We were on WVUM together, student radio. Jeremy Marks Peltz, JMP, who sent me these numbers. 2023 versus 2022 Miami Hurricanes. 7-5 this year versus 5-7 last year. This year, Miami's plus differential was 120. Miami's net scoring plus 120. Last year was minus 34. That's a huge jump to be plus 120. This season, 177 rushing yards per game versus 128 rushing yards per game last year, an improvement of almost 50 yards. 5.2 yards per carry this year, which is an excellent number, versus 3.7 last year, very pedestrian number. 97 rushing yards per game allowed this year versus 143 allowed last year. And we already talked about this a little bit earlier this week. I'll reiterate, this was a stat sent to me by our listener, BP, who says in 2022, Miami, in 7 losses, they lost by an average of 21 points. In 2023, Miami's 5 losses were by an average of 8 points. So again, if you go by the big picture numbers, Miami should have and could have made more than a 2-game jump this year. What were the big factors that led to only the 2-game jump? I already mentioned one of them. You take a kneel down against Georgia Tech, it's over. You're 8-4. Right? You're literally 8-4. That's a 1-game improvement that came down to one bad coaching call. All right. Yes, there were other clock management, play decision issues this year. So I'm hoping Mario Cristobal I think he's already learned. Second time was the charm because he did the same thing at Oregon. I think he has learned from the mistake of not taking that knee. I don't expect that same mistake to happen again. I also think that this offseason, and it's not just Cristobal, because obviously you have an offensive coordinator calling plays. You have analysts that are supposed to be helping you make these proper decisions when it comes to the analytics and, when to go for it, when not to go for it, when to pass, when not to. Like, there needs to be a lot of self-reflection and self-scouting from the coaching staff because they need to tighten up and they need to sharpen up because, we talked about it last season. In most of Miami's losses, they were getting blown out. So we didn't have the luxury of having these discussions about how, hey, we were one bad coaching decision away from securing a victory, right? But this year we had so many close losses, those conversations came up. So we need to tighten up the coaching. The other big area I think that could, separate Miami from, 7 wins this year, or maybe could have been 9 or 10 wins this year. you have to find consistency at the quarterback position. I try to give Tyler Van Dyke some benefit of the doubt because I know he, for much of the middle of the season, was playing through a lot of pain. I get it. Still made a lot of poor decisions. Still threw way too many interceptions. Miami had to turn to the kid a couple of times. Emory Williams helped you win that Clemson game. Came up short against Florida State. They kept things very buttoned up for him. If Miami was able to hit more passing plays in that Florida State game, you might even be talking about a victory. I know Florida State's an excellent team, credit to them and all that. So I think the big two areas that Miami needs to tighten up heading into next season, because obviously we love the foundations that are being laid on defense. Lance Guidry, you got to keep him, right? Don't let anyone snatch Guidry away. But the defense is absolutely trending in the right direction. There's no question about that. And I believe overall the offense is trending in the right direction, but spotty quarterback play and some coaching errors. And, I also think more consistent tight end play. I'm hoping Elijah Arroyo can be healthy next year. And I think Riley Williams is going to be a stud. I look for him to really step up in year 2. But quarterback play is the big thing, because in several of Miami's losses, you're thinking, man, we were just competent quarterbacking away from winning that game. That if we had thrown maybe 1 interception instead of 3 interceptions, we're talking about a victory instead of a loss. So those are big areas that I look at. And if you guys want to get more involved in the program, Locked On Canes, we're here every day, sometimes twice a day. You can support the channel. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button, hit the thumbs up, and subscribe. If you're listening to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google app, the Odyssey app. I do want to throw shout outs to a couple of new 5-star reviews that we've gotten. We get one from GA Kane 89. Thank you so much for the 5-star rating. Now, the review he wrote, thankfully, is outdated. I think he wrote this after either the NC State game or the Florida State game. I think the NC State game. He says, I can't believe how flat Miami's offense was. No sense of urgency, poor quarterback play, terrible play calling. And he writes a lot more stuff, but he does give us a 5-star review. So thank you for that. And we got a 5-star review from our guy, Chill, AKA Better Duck. You probably know him on social media as Better Duck. He says, I can't say enough good things about the Locked On Canes podcast, hosted by the incredibly knowledgeable and charismatic Alex Donno. Thank you. As a devoted Miami Hurricanes fan, the show has become an absolute must listen for me. Alex's passion for the team shines through in every episode, and his deep understanding of the Canes' history, current events, and future prospects is truly impressive. He covers all the bases from game analysis to player interviews and recruiting updates. It's evident that he's dedicated to providing his listeners with top-tier content. He continued the kind words, but if I read too many more nice things about myself, I'm going to blush, and it's going to be embarrassing. So I appreciate the review, Better Duck, and I appreciate all of you guys who leave us 5-star ratings and reviews. And if you do that, we will shout you out. It may not happen right away. Sometimes it happens after a couple weeks, but we will shout you out here on the channel if you leave us a 5-star rating and review. So thank you for joining us for the second time today, and we will do it again tomorrow. We will talk to you guys Monday on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.